Have you ever just looked at a world map? Australia is massive. It's this huge continent, just sitting there, seemingly full of endless space. But then, if you look at a map of where people actually live, it's almost completely empty. It's a giant puzzle, and today we're going to solve it. Why is Australia so incredibly, unbelievably empty?
And when I say empty, I really mean it. Get this, a staggering 90% of Australia's land is either totally uninhabited or has so few people you'd barely notice. Now, to really get your head around that number, you first need to understand just how big this place actually is.
Just look at this. The land area of Australia is almost identical to the contiguous United States. You know, the US without Alaska and Hawaii. It's pretty much the same amount of space. So you'd think, okay, similar story, right? Cities spread all over the place. But you would be totally, completely wrong.
And here's the punchline. This is where it gets wild. The entire population of the continent of Australia is just 26 million people. That is less than the population of one single American state, Texas. You could literally move every single person from Australia into Texas and still have room for another 4 million people. That's just mind-blowing.
So the question becomes obvious, right? You've got a country the size of the United States, but with the population smaller than Texas. So where is everybody? Why is most of this massive continent basically a ghost town? Well, the answer isn't really about history or politics. It's a fascinating story of a war waged by geography itself. Our investigation starts with the first and maybe the most obvious culprit, a crime that's been happening on a continental scale for millions of years. We're going to call it the Great Rain Heist.
And the weapon used in this heist is something called the rain shadow effect. Now, in simple terms, mountains can act like a giant wall. They literally stop rain clouds in their tracks, stealing all the precious water for one side and leaving the other side completely high and dry.
And this is exactly how that heist plays out in Australia. So you've got all this moist air coming in from the Pacific Ocean, right? It's heading west. But then, bam, it slams into this massive barrier called the Great Dividing Range, a chain of mountains running all the way down the east coast. The clouds get pushed up, they cool down, and they dump all their rain right there, on that coastal strip. By the time the air makes it over the mountains and into the interior, it's got nothing left. The rain's been stolen. And the consequence of this ongoing heist is extreme. It makes Australia the second driest inhabited continent on the entire planet. The only place that's drier is Antarctica. So no water, no people, no cities. Case closed, right? The middle is empty because it's a desert.
Well, not so fast. The lack of rain is a huge piece of the puzzle for sure, but it's not the whole story. Because there's a deeper, much more ancient reason for Australia's emptiness. What if you could magically make it rain there? Would the interior just spring to life? The answer is a hard no, and that leads us to our secret culprit.
And this brings us to our second clue. This is the part of the story that most people miss, but you could argue it's even more important than the rain. We need to dig into the secret of the ancient soil. You see, unlike places like North America or Europe that have had recent volcanoes and giant glaciers grinding up rocks and creating fresh new minerals, Australia is geologically ancient. It's flat and it's stable. It's just been sitting there, mostly undisturbed, for an incredibly long time. And that stability, well, it has a major downside. Over millions of years, what little rain there is has washed over the land and leached away all the good stuff, all the essential nutrients. It's left behind soil that is salty, thin, and, frankly, tired. It just doesn't have the key ingredients like phosphorus and nitrogen that you need for big-time farming. So even if you had the water, the ground itself can't support much. So what does that actually look like in the real world? Well, when your soil is that poor, you need a mind-boggling amount of land just to get a little bit of value out of it.
And this leads to something that's honestly hard to even comprehend: farms that are bigger than entire nations.
To really understand this, let's just look at one single property, Anna Creek Station. What you're looking at here isn't a national park. It's a privately owned cattle farm, and it just so happens to be the largest one in the world.
So just how big is it? Well, it covers almost 24,000 square kilometers. Now, that's a number so big it's almost meaningless by itself. So let's put it on a scale we can actually wrap our heads around.
And there it is. This single cattle station is larger than the entire country of Israel. Let that sink in for a second. You need an area bigger than a whole nation just to raise some cattle, because the land itself is so poor. This is the ultimate proof that you just can't build dense civilizations in Australia's interior.
So if the center of the country is a no-go zone of dry air and bad soil, where can people possibly live? Well, they're forced to do what life has always done in Australia. They cling to the very edge of the continent.
And this is the result. An incredible 85% of the entire population lives crammed within just 50 kilometers of the coast. And it makes perfect sense, right? This is where the Great Rain Heist dumps all its loot. It's the only place with reliable rainfall, with decent weather, and with the few pockets of land that are fertile enough to actually support everyone.
Now, there is one little exception that allows for some life further inland. It's called the Great Artesian Basin. It's this huge underground water reserve. But even this has a catch. The water is often brackish, kind of salty, which makes it okay for livestock to drink, but not for the kind of massive agriculture you'd need to support a big city.
So, when you put all the clues together, the rain being stolen by the mountains and the soil being ancient and totally worn out, you arrive at one single inescapable truth for this continent: geography is destiny.
This one sentence just captures the entire story perfectly. The emptiness isn't because of some historical accident or a lack of trying. It's a fundamental feature built into the continent itself.
So the real takeaway here is this: that huge, empty interior you see on the map, it's not available land just waiting to be developed. It's an unforgiving landscape forged over millions of years by geology and climate, where our modern way of life has no choice but to survive by clinging to the fringes. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. The story of Australia is this powerful reminder that where we live and how we live is so often dictated by these deep, powerful geographic forces. Which kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of our own world is shaped by these invisible forces that we rarely even stop to consider?